You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welbourn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. Joining him is everyone's favorite coach and hair model, Chris, aka Tex McQuilkin, Power Athlete's Director of Performance. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Power Athlete Nation, welcome to a special episode of Power Athlete Radio as we pull founder and CEO John Welbourn's presentation from the 2022 Power Athlete Coach Collective entitled Lessons from Antiquity. John leans on his experience as a classically trained rhetorician and decades of going to battle with the bullshit in the world of sports performance to hand off empowering tools for our coaches to become hammers and impact their community. If you're interested in checking out the slideshow of the presentation, watch us on Spotify or YouTube and be sure to smash that subscribe button. If you're aiming to level up your social intelligence and experience as a coach, head to powerathletehq.com/academy to check out all of our coach resources, including the only ticket to this year's Coach Collective in Austin, Texas, becoming a Power Athlete certified coach. Now let's hand it off to the big guy. Talk to me, Johnny.
All right, we're going to get Mr. McQuilkin to fire up my prezo while he's doing that. This is like a really interesting long time coming, especially the talk that I'm going to give, and it's about antiquity. And when people say antiquity, you probably think of Indiana Jones and, I don't know, maybe going to the museum. So as a young 17, 18-year-old kid, as I started taking recruiting trips, they call them now, but I was telling the guys when I was, I think, 16 years old, I had something like 104 scholarship offers. Right, so I remember telling my dad, I'm like, I'm going to go to college and play football, and they're going to pay for it. And he's like, wait a minute, you get a chance to go to college and they're going to pay you? That's great. Why don't we take this money, we'll split it, I'm going to take half, and I'm going to buy you a truck. So we did. I got a truck when I was 16, and I was like, oh shit, I better get a scholarship. So I went to go look at all these schools. I went to SC, UCLA, Colorado, Nebraska were my 5 trips. UCLA was, SC was too close, and I hated the, it just was the worst. The UCLA, I couldn't get over the powder blue uniforms. Like it was like, they like, we went into the locker room, they had these like pale gold helmets and these shiny powder blue uniforms, and I was like, ugh, I don't know how anybody gets excited about playing in powder blue. I went to Colorado, had an amazing experience with a guy named Doc Crease, who was their strength coach. I loved every minute of it. I don't know, it didn't gel with me the same way. Nebraska was amazing. The food was incredible. Anybody that knows me, like that's the way I show gratitude, and I know somebody likes me is if the meal was good. If I come over to your house and it's like, oh, we're having boiled chicken and rice, which is what my older brother serves, I know that somebody's not in. Like Kelly comes over and I'm like, I have some steaks in the fridge. So do you want to cook them at 10 o'clock at night? Because that's important to me. When I went to Nebraska, the meal was amazing. And then we had Boyd Epley. Did you guys hear the podcast of Boyd Epley? It was unreal. Like I met him. He was by far it was amazing to have him on the podcast. As an 18-year-old kid, he was the most pompous asshole I've ever met. He was sitting up in this like command center at this desk with all these screens, and he was like, had a microphone, was yelling at people, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not coming to this place. So I went to Cal. The reason I went to Cal was when I was a little kid, our next door neighbor, a guy named Lynn Wilson, who was a doctor, my dad generally referred to him as the smartest person he knew, which is crazy because my dad might be the smartest person I ever knew. Graduated high school at 16, graduated college at 19, graduated law school at 21, working a full-time job, and was a trial attorney for years. And I always joke with Chris, part of the reason that I'm so quick and when we talk shit is because I grew up with a really smart, condescending father. Anybody else grow up like that? I know Kelly did and some of the other guys. So when I got a chance to go to Cal, I had this in my mind, this is where the really smart people go. So I go on a trip, and I never dreamed of playing football. It just wasn't in the cards for me. I was good in high school, I was getting a chance to go, but I didn't know anybody played in the NFL. It seemed so far off. I was just stoked to get to college and get to a school that the valedictorian in my high school didn't get a chance to go to. So I go to Cal, and it's beautiful. Anybody here has been to Berkeley? Strawberry Canyon, Like it's such a magical place. Like I know you see it on TV and like the negatives and the weird homeless people shitting everywhere and the riots and all that, but like for Strawberry Canyon, playing in Memorial Stadium and the experience I had was amazing. So we show up and I always wanted to be an attorney, right? My dad's an attorney, my older brother's an attorney, my other brother went to law school but never practiced. It's kind of our family business. And so they show up and they're like, hey, we're gonna ask you to go speak with this old man who is the dean of the law school, a guy named Adrian Cragen. So I sit down with this man, he's in his 80s, old tax attorney, had since retired, was the dean. They just gave him an office so he had something to do. Because the one thing that happens to lawyers when they retire and they don't have an office to go to, what do? They die. So even old lawyers still go work with young lawyers so they have a place to go, because it's a common knowledge that as an attorney, the minute that you're not a trial attorney and you're not actively doing something in the law, your life ends. My dad passed away or got diagnosed like right around Christmas time, and he tried his last case on the 13th and got diagnosed with cancer on like right after Christmas, and then passed away 2 months later. And the thing when he was most upset about was he was going to have to actually call in and tell the bar that he was suspending his status. That was the hardest thing that he had to do. Not, hey, I'm dying, leaving you guys, your mom, the whole deal. It's like I have to call the bar and tell them I'm not going to be a practicing attorney. So that's how important it was in our family. So I go meet with Adrian Cragen. As I'm sitting down with this old man, he was a tax attorney in Hollywood. So after we go through, there was an old lawyer named Kent Redwine who he mentored my father. All young lawyers get mentored by older lawyers. It's how it works. As you guys go through and think about mentors that you've had in your life or mentors that you are, because there'll be people you mentor. It's such an experience because that's how you learn something as intricate as the law. Come to find out that he knew Kent Redwine because Kent was also a Hollywood attorney. And so we started rapping a little bit, and he's like, if you're gonna come here, what do you wanna do? I'm like, I really wanna go to law school. He's like, let me tell you, there's a scholarship here in my name called the Adrian Cragen Scholarship for a 4-year letterman to go to Bolt. You're my guy. And I'm like, yes. So my next question is, what should I study? And he's like, there's this program that's only a few programs in the world or in the country have it called rhetoric. And it's excellent. It's argumentative writing. It's perfect as a pre-law. And I want you to do it. So I'd never heard of rhetoric. I didn't have Google. So I just had to go home, and I got an Encyclopedia Britannica and I looked it up, and it was the art of persuasion. It was argument, it was persuasion. And so I end up going to Berkeley, signing my letter, getting in there the first day, first class I get Rhetoric 1A. And the first discussion we had, and here is what the definition that I know it to be. Rhetoric is the ancient art of persuasion, the study of persuasion, and the individual process of persuasion. Strategic choices and approaches to communicate, whether textually, verbally, or visually. 3 rhetoric appeals: ethos, pathos, and logos. So this was day 1 rhetoric, right? Ethos, pathos, and logos. Aristotle talked about breaking down these arguments into different points. So, seems great. All of a sudden they hand us this book list, and it has 37 books. So I have 37 books to read that semester, all of the rhetoric stuff, and I loved it. The fact that I got to read books and write papers. So I looked at it really differently. People are like, oh, you had to read books. No, what I got a chance to do is I got a chance to drop in and have a conversation with the smartest people that have ever walked this planet at the moment they were the smartest people thinking about this. I think about that. When we talk about books, and I don't know if we look at them in the right way, where it's you're reading this information, you're trying to absorb it. I looked at it like the smartest people to ever walk the planet. I get a chance to sit in on their conversation and hear their thoughts. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, him writing about, being one of the greatest emperors of Rome, and now it's become extremely trendy to quote the Stoics, and you see it all over Instagram, but we studied it. What people don't talk about was there was a few other disciplines in there, which you guys will laugh at, which the very first one's called the Cynics. And they were called the Cynics because they were cynical and simple. So simple that they believed that they should own nothing. The guy that started it, his name was Diogenes. I can't remember his name exactly. But the only thing, he lived in a bathtub. The only thing he owned was a cup. And one time he saw a child drinking water out of his hands. He shattered the cup and said, I've made it too complicated. I should own nothing. Now, he also shit in the streets, masturbated in public, was a complete fucking degenerate scumbag. He was like a homeless person. So, I mean, obviously, but that was his philosophy. The next ones were skeptics, who were naturally skeptical of everything, so they got nothing done. And then the Epicureans, which were all about friendship and love, and, you know, everybody's glorious and let's all be friends, which didn't really go anywhere. And then the last one, obviously, is the Stoics, which is about ethics. But I get a chance to have this conversation with the smartest people on the planet, and more importantly, I get to read books, try to pull out arguments, and then try to convince my professor, or the people that were reading it, of my argument. And then we would get into these epic discussions that were very Socratic method, where now all of a sudden you're sitting in a room and you get to stand up and argue your point. And I remember one time I hadn't done the work, and I got called on, and I tried to bullshit through it, and the professor was like, "Okay, Mr. Welbourn, you can leave. You're not here today. I'm gonna mark you in absence, and if you get 3 absences, I'm gonna fail you in the class. Never come unprepared." So I had to leave the class and took my shit and left, and was like, fuck that guy. No, why was I mad at him? Why? Because he called me on my bullshit. I didn't do the work. I tried to bullshit, and the problem is you can't really bullshit a bullshitter. And if these guys are professional rhetoricians, then they're professional bullshitters. Right? I could go to my football coach. I mean, it was probably one of the best times in my life. And so what kind of hurts me now is you see people be like, oh, college is obsolete. And I'm like, oh man, I hope it's not. Why? Because I got a chance to go learn from some really sharp people. You know, and then they'd occasionally suck you into a class like rhetoric of poetry, which I honestly, I think I got a C, and it was by the teeth, because you're trying to argue somebody's poetic license and all that is just a mess. So as we got into this thing, people always would ask me, and they'd make jokes during the end. You know, obviously years later, I graduated in 4 years and do my master's in education in my 5th year, and actually got a chance to student teach. And playing in the NFL was dramatically easier than teaching. So any of those guys that teach high school, I have much sympathy for you. But everybody would always ask, because all these dipshit sports writers would be like, "Ooh, what's rhetoric?" And I was like, well, let me lace you, you fucking moron. And if you guys ever heard me in Philly or ever knew me then, I was extremely prickly about that. And I was constantly trying to fucking prove to these guys how dumb they are and how smart I was, which wasn't difficult because it was true. Because I still read, and I was highly adapted in this. But the interesting thing was people always ask me, what would you ever do with a rhetoric degree? How is that ever gonna help you? And I'm gonna show you how. So you guys have obviously seen ethos. I saw somebody today wearing a shirt that said ethos strength conditioning. Yeah, right there. So what is ethos? This is the fundamental aspect of this. Ethos is an element of the argument, the persuasion through which a speaker or writer establishes their credibility and their knowledge on a subject by identifying themselves as an authority. So when you hear individuals like me stand up here and be like, you know, I started training at this age, and I got a chance to play for 10 years in the NFL, not just play, but be a starter. Now let's get and start talking a little bit about football. What I've instantly done is I've created ethos. Why? This guy must know what the fuck he's talking about, because he obviously played in the NFL, and if we're talking about football and lifting weights, it's probably what he did for a living. Kelly Starrett gets up there, and he's like, you know, not only am I a doctor of physical therapy, I've run mobility WOD and done this, and high-level paddler. Whenever you hear people discussing where they come from, their background, what they're doing, whether they know they're doing it or not, they're instinctively building their ethos. And I listen to it all the time. Now, Chris and Luke and the guys that taught on the CrossFit football seminar, we discuss this very regularly. You didn't do anything to build your ethos. Why are people gonna believe you? As you go in this, and I'm not trying to, well, for many times I am arguing something, but I don't have to convince you of anything. But more importantly, what I'm helping you guys do is create credibility for your clients, for your writing, for the people that are around you, by one, starting and building ethos, right? If I want to talk about you know, law enforcement, and I talk to Tyson, it's a good chance he does, because how long have you been in law enforcement, Tyson? 15 years. Yeah, so he should know something about law enforcement. If I want to talk about throwing, or we bring people in and we start talking about rotational power, who do I reach out to bring? Derek Woodsky. Right? Not only is he an incredible lecturer, speaker, and amazing human, but the dude was probably the best hammer thrower come out of Canada. Right? So like when you look at this, like I'm not randomly bringing in some guy who's like, oh yeah, I think you show the hammer, and somebody's like, have you ever thrown the hammer? It's like, no, I saw it on TV once. What happens when you hear that? You check the fuck out. You're like, this guy doesn't know anything. Right? So like, here's the thing, like if you were to show up and talk to a mechanic, for example, who's got a shop and whatever, are you just gonna assume that he knows how to fix your car because he has a shop? Most people do. It's fucking Amco, let me go in there and bring brakes, right? Because people don't ask questions. But in this community, ethos is extremely important. If I want to talk about squatting 1,000 pounds, I'm probably going to go find somebody that squatted 1,000 pounds like Chris Duffin. How many times do you squat 1,000 pounds? 3. For a triple, right? So I should be 1/3 as good and squat it for 1, right? So like, you know, when we had Louis Simmons on the podcast, did Louis have to build his ethos? No, because the internet's built it for him, right? When you heard his name, you guys know him because he's done something. So there's an interesting quote, and I'll get into it in a little bit. It's coming up, but it's like, you know, like sometimes, like between a young man and an old man, the only way that you've known they live in a life is because they're old. You know, what you do between those two moments is what people remember your name. So for a guy like Louis Simmons, we bring him on the podcast, which was an amazing podcast for me because I had known Louis for so long and had such an amazing relationship with him. But what's weird is my relationship wasn't it was not unique, or it was very unique to how other people viewed him. People hated him as a pretentious, abrasive asshole. He liked me, why? Why do you think he liked me? Because I played 10 years in the NFL. Right, when we talked about it, and when he first brought me in, he had some football players in there, and he asked me, hey, can you work with him? Can you show him some stuff? And we started with the stance. Let me see you get in your stance. Let me show you exactly toe position. We started talking about hand, and I literally started breaking it down from the ground up, from the static position, and for 20 minutes, all I did was talk about the starting position, because you can't start in a good position and you can't start in a bad position and get to a good position once you start moving, right? Like we've talked about numerous times in this deal. Louis' fucking head exploded, and he's like, dude, this is great. And instant friendship, why? Because I proved myself and I knew what the fuck I was talking about. So, like Nick Kyle calls me, and you know, Nick's not only an amazing PT and an intelligent dude, wants to get into coaching powerlifters. What was my advice? You need to start powerlifting. And he started powerlifting. Sending me videos, raps, the whole deal. He wants to get geared in. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the only way you get into that community is by embracing it and doing it, right? You want to train fighters? Go take a punch, right? So this is done to build trust and establish yourself as an expert on the subject in question. So when a parent or a coach or somebody comes in and wants to talk to you about training their athletes and whatever it looks like, what's the first thing you do? You have to build your ethos. Why are they here? They walked in the door. They're expecting me to meet them halfway by me talking about it. And you don't have to do it. Be like, oh, you know what? We're training your son for this. I mean, part of this thing with Power Athlete, and you guys can use me. You can use me for your ethos. Oh man, I'm good friends and I train with this dude that played 10 years in the NFL, and this is the system in this. This is what the shield is. This is ethos because we bleed on this thing, right? And just know that like these skulls aren't just some like cool fucking trendy, you know, I want to be a pirate and slit a throat, you know, type of bullshit. Like, and I'll get into the whole history of the skull, which is kind of neat, which kind of gets a little farther down this talk. So pathos. So pathos is the next piece. This is the emotion. The problem with pathos is that if you haven't, and the emotional appeal, if you haven't established your ethos, pathos is just whiny. Right? So it allows you, the pathos works in conjunction with ethos by providing an emotional component to an established argument, right? Remember, emotions can make us vulnerable, and what do we learn from Rumstock? Vulnerability is good. I had a really interesting moment of vulnerability where I realized, like, that I fucking got one-upped, and it was on the podcast we did with Jim Wendler, right? Jim, who is one of my favorite people in the world for the mere fact he's like Kelly and a lot of you guys, you know, Duffin and Woodsky and what, but like chicken soup for the soul. Like he's one of those people you meet and he's so engaged and he's so willing to share. And we got up after our conversation and like we like went and I kind of like went to give him like you know, shake hands, and he slipped right by and he's like, we hug. And he's like, it's what we do, we hug. And he had tears in his eyes and he's like, thank you so much. He's like, I'm a hugger. And he like wiped tears out of his eyes. And I was like, fuck, dude. I wasn't ready to meet that level of emotion, that vulnerability, and I felt like disingenuous for it, that this guy came and invested his time, got on the podcast, and embraced me like I would my mom, my dad, my brother, for the mere fact that we shared a moment, and we've been friends for a number of years. And I was like, fuck, man, I need to be more vulnerable like that. Not just with my kids and my wife or my mom and my family, but for the people. Brittany got her block, and she failed the first time, and she was pretty emotional about it. And I told her, like, you as a mom, your job is to go, and I want you to put your daughters through bedrock. And she came over to me with tears in her eyes. And I have a problem too now where for some reason, when I see people cry, I start crying. And with tears in her eyes, and I'm tearing up, and she's telling me the story, and I'm like, I'm so proud of you. You did exactly what I wanted you to. You created this bond, you created this relationship, you gave your daughters a gift of strength, power, confidence. You're doing exactly what every mother and parent and coach and mentor should do, and you did it in real time. And unfortunately, it came after a defeat of losing it, but you came back and you rocked it pregnant. I'm so fucking proud of you. I can't say that enough. And so the problem is that emotions make us vulnerable. This vulnerability can be a powerful tool in getting the audience. To believe your position is a compelling one. When pathos is used without first establishing ethos, the argument becomes weak and non-compelling. So you have to establish your ethos, and then you have to show vulnerability. And if you can do that, the problem is, and you guys know this, if somebody says it's too vulnerable too quick, you're like, I don't even know this person. Why are they crying? It's uncomfortable. It's off-putting. Because one, they haven't created that bridge. They haven't done the work to establish the relationship. Now, what's interesting is I view this stuff from a writing point of view. If I'm gonna write a paper and I'm gonna discuss, I just got done reading Dr. Shannon, book Countdown, and like if I was trying to make arguments in that, but there's an emotional appeal associated, but you have to do the work, you have to lay the groundwork. So if not, it just becomes whiny. And you guys know, you've had kids or you had people, like if you have an athlete that you know busts his ass and he wants to be here and he's the most amazing kid and whatever, and he breaks down, you're like, shit, you know what? He needs me. I'm gonna help him. Some kid comes in and does none of that and just starts crying, you're like, get this fucking kid out of here, right? Because vulnerability without ethos is just whiny. Logos, the logical appeal. Now, this is something I would get on Chris too much about. Chris, I needed to establish ethos, right? Logos is the logical, where now all of a sudden it sets reps, numbers. These are my degrees. These are all the numbers I put together. Now you believe me because. Now this is the logical. The logos is effective when grounded in credibility or ethos. So if Chris gets up there and it's like, hey, and you know what? Part of the crafting of his origin story, played football, got to lacrosse, all of the origin story he would tell me, I'd be like, this is solid gold. Now you stack all this other stuff on top, but it all works because you built this foundation of ethos. Kelly gets in there and he's like, I believe we're talking about missing hip extension. Why? Because I've worked with tens of thousands of athletes that have all had this problem, and this has been the situation. And then here's all this research. We were hearing about red lights, and he's dropping Dr. Huberman and this. All these pieces are creating ethos. This guy obviously is pretty switched on. He knows the technology. These are the numbers associated. We heard it, right? People that increase collagen within 30 days of the face, and you're like, well, I want more collagen in the face. Why is more collagen in the face good? Because as people age, they lose collagen, and they look old as fuck. You want to look young? If I can get lots of collagen in your face and I'm sitting over there being like 30 days, I'm fucking in, right? So why? Because he created his ethos. I'm sorry, his ethos up front. I'm totally forgetting your name. Freddie. So Freddie did a great job. What did he do? He laid the foundation. He talked about cancer. He did this, went through this. He textbook nailed it. And I don't even know if he knew what he was doing. He just knew how to put together to be like, and then, hey, here's the research, here's the emotion, here's who I am, and now here's this amazing product. And you guys are like thinking to yourself, I guess we're doing red light tomorrow, right? What if he just got up and it was like, here's all the numbers. You're like, I've heard lots of numbers. What if he got up there and he was like, I got sick. Feel sorry for me, buy my product. You'd be like, ooh, that's weird. But all of these things play. And so what happens is if you understand the symbiotic relationship and the interweaving and the ability to be able to come in and out of these pieces with ethos, pathos, and logos, you can start formulating better arguments for yourself. Your writing improves, and more importantly, you can spot when people are doing it to you. I can spot it all the time. I'm like, man, this guy spent 20 million building his ethos. And then I attack him on it. Ask him specific questions. And then what they do is then they fucking go to their emotional appeal. And I'm like, ooh, you went to the emotion too soon. Non-compelling argument, I gotta go. Now at this point, you lost me. I don't even care if you bring me logos. I don't need it because you didn't build the foundation. You didn't do the what? The bedrock, right? Which is the ethos. So for you guys coming to this weekend, all of the work that you do is creating ethos and who you are as individuals. You hear me do it on the podcast. Somebody doesn't know who I am, I tell them exactly who I am. And instantly, if they don't know who I am, as soon as I start comparing notes with them, instant different fucking chain of, different tone in their voices. And we've done it for years. You know, we talk about this because this is, and not that everything's an argument, it's just not. But if you look at everything in terms of I'm my product and I have to present myself in the best way, then this becomes fundamental and you have to understand it. So this aspect of ethos, pathos, and logos was so fundamental for my writing, allowed me to go through and, you know, get a 3.4 GPA in Berkeley, go on and, you know, get a master's, and then I thought I was going to law school. So I took my LSATs, did all that stuff, and then what happened? I got drafted, and I figured I'd play for a year and just go back to law school and get Adrian Cragen Scholarship, and then that turned into 10 years. And as I was sitting on my couch, looking at law school applications, trying to figure out how I'd go back, is when CrossFit reached out to me and Greg Glassman asked me the infamous question, hey, will you come help us develop our technology and how to train athletes? Very, very interesting. Now, now that you guys hear this, what I want you to do is I want you to apply this three-prong attack to every time you hear somebody speak, like a Tony Robbins, right? Incredible speaker, to the point where, like, I know there's a lot of charlatan in him and every part of my body goes up, but goddamn, he's compelling. And he switches between the arguments and he pulls things out and he knows information. It's really amazing to listen to excellent speakers. It's why I was so happy to get Derek and hear Ralph. I mean, Ralph's one of the best speakers I've done. Why? For some reason, that little fucker commands respect, and he's tiny. But he might as well be 7 feet tall. It doesn't matter. When he said to me the other day, what are you, 5'7"? He's like, yeah, I'm 5'7". I'm like, I never thought of Ralph as being 5'7". I always thought he was 6'5", right? Because the way he carries himself in his presentation. And what's interesting is Ralph won't do a lot of ethos building. Like, you'll never hear Ralph build his ethos. But the minute you hear him talking, you're like, holy shit, this guy's really smart, right? Because it's so well put together. So for you guys, who are you? Like, I build ethos, I do it all the time. Why? Because not that I have to, because it's a cool fucking story, right? And it's because not a lot of people got to do my job. A lot of people didn't get a chance to do your jobs. All right. So I wanted to talk to you guys about this, but I also wanted to introduce you to some thinkers that really influenced me in college and still to this day. I'm not doing this for, you know, some Stoics deal, but on Instagram. But Cicero was really interesting for me because he's known as the first rhetorician. He's really the world's first lawyer. And what's pretty fascinating on Cicero is, and I want you to keep an eye on these dates. So he was born in 106 BC and passed in 43 BC. So Cicero obviously was kind of really fascinating character in terms of, like, born extremely wealthy and married wealthy, and was extremely influential not only in the court but in all of politics in Rome. And he wrote 2 books that were impactful for me. One was called The Laws, and the other one was called The Republic. And they were written as dialogues. Like, they were written as conversations between friends. And I remember reading them. Side note, did any of you guys listen to Joe Rogan and Mark Zuckerberg on podcasts they did? So when they're going through all the AI stuff, he talked about memories requiring 3D dimensions. For you to remember something, you have to be in a 3-dimensional deal. And the problem is that if everything's 2-dimensional, you don't have any way to categorize memory. And this is something they were going out for their AI and their virtual reality stuff. That was really impactful because I can remember where I was when I read this stuff. I was within a coffee shop in Berkeley. I'd gone to office hours and I sat down and I first discovered these 2 books by Cicero. And it struck me not as if they were presenting information, but it was like he was talking to a friend. Did any of you guys read the Screw Tape Letters? So the Screw Tape Letters are an interesting deal where it's a senior devil is giving advice to a younger devil on how to corrupt man. Look it up, it's pretty epic. But that was how it was written. And it was really striking to me because I had never thought about allowing somebody to have a conversation in my presence. So it felt a lot like I was drinking coffee and these 2 guys were having a conversation. That the first rhetorician and one of the best thinkers ever to come out of this thing. So that first gave me that kind of that feeling of dropping in and being a fly on the wall, which is honestly a lot like podcasts. So Cicero wrote these books like he was having a conversation with his friend and we were listening to a podcast. And that was extremely impactful for me because that style of learning makes sense to me. more so than somebody just regurgitating, like vomiting information on me. Conversations where there's give and take and exchange of ideas are so much more powerful. So the reason that we use the skulls in Power Athlete comes from Cicero. So this little skull, you see him up there, you see him on the shirts, they're just not cool things. It's one of Cicero's foundational, I guess you could say, really principles was memento mori. And all of the imagery that Harry does on the t-shirts with the memento mori and the skulls and all this come from our conversations. So what Harry does is we talk, and we talk about different things that are important to me, imagery, whatever, and then he goes away and creates this shit and blows my head off. And the memento mori is extremely important because this was Cicero. He knew the value of life and embraced the statement memento mori, which is Latin for remember you must die. And the skull aspect is that common reminder. Now, if you go to Europe or you travel all over, you see old headstones. Memento mori and skulls are carved into headstones for as long as we can remember, right? The pirate, hoisted the Jolly Roger, which had the skull which came from it. So there's this idea of like, death is coming. Marcus Aurelius said death is coming for us all man can do is smile. All of these skulls have that piece for me. I mean, there's a reason, so Starling Gear, my buddy Rick from Starling Gear, he actually, these are his skulls. The Power Athlete skull is based off of his skulls. And I always carry, a Strider knife with a Starling Gear bead on it as a constant reminder. It's why all of this stuff, that's why I stamp skulls into the blocks. It's why our gifts have skulls on them. Because there's this constant reminder of memento mori. And it's, this been driving fact for not just Power Athlete, but CrossFit football. And then the 10 years before that, where the gear shifter was a skull. I used to wear, I got a cool skull ring, and people were like, oh, what's up with the skull jewelry? And I'm like, I just like skulls? No, I was kind of embarrassed to be like, well, I read all this Cicero, and he was big into memento mori, and then people would be like, oh, this guy's a fucking dork, and just kind of peel off. But this statement, death smiles is all a man can do is smile back, comes from a Marcus Aurelius, who lived actually later than Cicero. So the one thing that I always remember from Cicero is a few statements. One is the youth will always maintain their physical ability, but age retains wisdom. And there's an interesting piece where he talked about two different men as they age. And you guys know this. There's the men as they age, where you see young people doing stuff and you're like, God damn it, I'm so happy they get to go out and do this. Like I saw some friends out at Burning Man and I was like, I'm so happy they're there. I'm so glad I'm not, right? And then there's other people that are bitter. I'm getting old. How dare you do these things? And like men as they age and women, you can either continue to revel in the successes and the whimsical nature of youth, or you can become bitter by it. I love watching my kids run. I love watching people do epic stuff. And it's because I think I'm a fan of humanity. I want to see people stand on the biggest stage, have their greatest moment, and fucking crush it. I don't want to see people with half measures. And then you run into other people that are bitter at the world because they can no longer be who they wanted. Everybody got their chance. Right, I got a chance to play for 10 years. Was it long enough? No. It took me a number of years to be okay watching because I was still mad about it, but then something switched. And I was like, you know what, it's their time. It's not my time, you selfish fuck. Let those guys go out and play and enjoy them and celebrate them and be so proud that somebody else is going to do it. Not as good as I did, which I have no problem telling them, they suck. They didn't play in the game we did. And even when I get together with my old friends, the game wasn't as tough. This game, it's neutered. Right, but that's also angry old men, right? So the memento mori, this comes from Cicero. People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of one thing in which it is right to be stingy. Now think about that. People are like extremely stingy with their shit, with their possessions, right? If you were a cynic, you wouldn't have any possessions, so it really wouldn't matter. But it's so true. Think about how much time people waste. Right? Like, is it wrong to be a time miser? I try to pack so much stuff in we were planning this whole thing. I had to like clean this place up. We had all of this work to do. I had so much work to do that I wouldn't even literally, I just like blocked Harry out because there were so many projects. But my wife's like, hey, we gotta build, I need you to build a truck for Wade's Army. So in the last 6 weeks, we spent roughly 200 to 300 hours personally, DJ probably more, and we built a bitchin' truck, which you guys are gonna see tonight. I mean, that thing was a shell on the 29th. And it was, I would get up in the morning, I would train or not train, I would work till noon, and then I was in the shop till 10, 11, midnight every night, trying to build this truck. Why? Because these kids need us. So how I choose to spend my time, is it how I wanted to spend my time? Not really. But unfortunately, I was the person to do it, we needed it, I could get it done, and now we can help some kids, which at the end of the day, maybe might give me some points from St. Peter at some point. So this idea for you guys isn't to be stingy with your time, but I want you to be smart with how you spend it. Don't waste time on toxic people. Let me say it again. Don't waste time with toxic people. And if amazing people choose to spend time with you, like my friends that got to come, like Raf and all you, I mean, you guys especially, but like Raphael and K-Star and Christophin and Woodsky and these guys, I mean, these guys are busy guys too. And the fact that like they came and showed up for me and got a chance to come work with you guys, so they're extremely busy. And they're stingy with their time, I know, because I had to call and negotiate with Kelly's wife for a lot of years to get Kelly to come out and play with us. Because he's busy, and it's empowering, it's humbling for me that these guys would come and invest in us and teach you guys and work with you guys. Because here's the deal, you're not going to find this anywhere else. Like you can't go to these things. Like unless you'd come and fought for your block one and stole that fucking block from me, you weren't going to get this, because you can't, like these guys don't put on seminars. You're not going to be able to go to the Derek Woodsky seminar. You might catch K-Star on YouTube, and Roth, you'd have to show up in Tampa and fucking let Raider beat up on you. So what I want you to do is I want you to be smart with your time. And I want you to be stingy with it. But I want you to respect and love and just be thankful for when people waste time. I always think about my wife. I'm like, man, I'm wasting all this time with you. Hopefully it all pans out. So Seneca's the next one. Now, if you guys are on the internet, you'll see some, Aubrey Marcus quote, constantly quoting the Senex and this. And Seneca was extremely impactful for one reason. One, he's a sharp dude, but really, for some reason, everything he wrote survived. So Cicero, some of this stuff, I mean, there's other writers' stuff survived. If, Plato and Aristotle, we know, but like for some reason, everything that Seneca wrote survived for 2,000 years. Like Marcus Aurelius, I think we have 2 books from him. There's Meditations and maybe one other, but not a lot is known. So this is amazing. So there's a lot of quotes to fucking pull out. So people, want to get Instagram followers, and they got, graphic design. They post it up there and give you a bitch and Seneca quote. And there is no absence of amazing quotes from this dude, right? So he was born in 4 BC. So what was the other guy born in? Yeah. So now he lives many years, years later. So they weren't contemporaries. So Cicero started, and then Seneca came, and yet people really classify him as the Stoic. But for me, with the memento mori, Cicero, for me personally, is really the foundation for that, and it was within the way we were taught. We were given these books in succession to create a foundation for all of this knowledge. So he was born in Spain, passed away, and he was extremely rich. Very rich. His dad moved him and his brother to Rome when they were young so they could become educated within the confines of Rome. So, like I said, he's remembered because much of what he's written has survived for 2,000 years. Now, this is fascinating to me. Was he the smartest dude? I don't know. We just know the most because he wrote the most and it all survived. So that's always fascinating to me. Like in 100 years, what are we going to know? The person that survives the most, but now we have this thing called the internet where everything's categorized. All your bad decisions are forever crystallized. I tell my kids that, don't do anything stupid because the internet will never forget. There's a bunch of shit that I am so glad there was no internet around, that we have no documentation of. I'd be so embarrassed. If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. Like that's one of those quotes that you're like, God damn it, how come I didn't say that? Because it's so true, right? If you don't know where you sail, But how do you know if the wind is good or bad? If you don't know where you're headed in this world, how do you know if the direction in which you're going is the correct one? When we were on seminars, we'd go to lunch, I would get in the car and drive as fast as I could in one direction, and I would wait for those guys to get on the phone and figure out where the fuck we were going. And they were like, why are you driving so fast? I'm like, because I'm going somewhere at 100 miles an hour. We're probably going the wrong direction. We're gonna get 3 U-turns, but eventually we're gonna get in the right place. But it's so true. So for you guys, you have to know where your wind comes from. You have to know where you're going in this deal, and you have to understand it, because how do you know if you're going in the right direction unless you have a destination or where your wind's coming from? Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. How many of you guys would have thought that that would have been, who was the Packers coach, Vince Lombardi? How many of you guys would have thought that was Lombardi? How many people could I have attributed this quote to and fooled you? Every high school football coach, right? Every strength coach, every person you've ever trained. I'm pretty sure Roth dropped this one on me and didn't tell me. He's like, yeah, I just came up with this quote. And I'm like, oh, well, fuck you, that was Seneca. Well, I know this shit. So luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. How many times have somebody said to you, you're so lucky? And you thought to yourself, shit, this didn't feel like luck. This felt like a lot of hard work. But if you want to believe it's luck, I'm not going to change your mind. So what I want to do is I want to work so hard that everybody thinks I'm lucky forever. Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah, it's easy luck. I didn't do anything. I don't know why it happened. Look at this. I picked up this gold brick and it's so heavy. I'm so lucky to stub my toe on a gold brick. It doesn't work like that. So these are the 3 lessons from Seneca, and this is pretty foundational for every talk that you heard. And here's the best part. I didn't talk about any of this with anybody. And you guys heard Kelly yesterday. What was the first thing he talked about? Find a mentor, find an anchor, right? Decide upon a standard to live by, decide where you want to be, find a mentor and be opening to mentoring those around you, right? I mean, it was crazy. Kelly talked about, you guys need mentors. And more importantly, you need to mentor somebody. You have to give. If somebody gives to you, you have to give equally. If somebody gave me a gift, then I have to turn around and give them a gift. That's the way it works. Because if not, what is it? It's selfish. And you've broken one of the fundamental rules of being a Stoic, is the idea that it's not about the world, it's about you and your personal journey moving across and trying to shepherd across to this idea that I'm gonna be a better version of myself. So never be a slave to your own wealth. This is a really interesting one because Seneca looked at money as a tool to use to progress his life, not something to be hoarded. And I know this is extremely difficult, especially as a gym owner and as a parent. You're like doing all this math, do I have budget, whatever, the whole thing. But realizing that, wealth is can be one of 2 things. Like you see some people that are extremely wealthy, like billionaires, and you look at their life and you're like, I don't know if I'd want that life. I mean, like it just looks kind of weird. And I've been around some really, really, really rich people, and I wouldn't want any part of them. I don't know if their life is better. I mean, they just have more cool shit, but when it breaks, it costs a lot more to fix. And they don't have anonymity. They don't have the ability to access in society, which is which is the most basic thing, which is simple relationships where you feel empowered by people. When you're that rich, if you're Elon Musk, every time you meet somebody, what are you thinking? Yeah, this guy's trying to access me in some way. How many times are those guys, the Mark Zuckerbergs and Elon Musk, how many times are they going to meet somebody that's extremely just, how are you, man? It's like to get to know you as an individual. You could never ask that question. You could never have an event like this. I went to Tony Gonzalez's Hall of Fame. I got there as party a little early, ran into Michael Strahan, who I hadn't seen in years, and then I ran into Lauren Sanchez, who's Tony's baby's mama's oldest son, kind of deal, and her boyfriend, Jeff Bezos. And she's like, and this is my boyfriend, Jeff. And I'm like, my wife loves your shit. It shows up at our house every day. I see your brown deal. And he was just hanging out. I'm like, it's Jeff Bezos. I should have hit him for the podcast. But I was like looking around for like drones and security, and the dude was just hanging out. And I was kind of like, everybody was kind of uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden the party started, and what happened? He just ghosted it. Why? Because he can't be in the middle of that whole thing. So don't be a slave to it. The next one is fight your ego. I've told you guys for years, whether it be on the podcast or anything I've done, ego is by far the most dangerous shit we have. My dad used to say ego has killed more people than cancer. It fucking hurt me. I was a young NFL player. I got rated. We came out of a lost in an NFC championship game. I got hurt. I got my knee scoped on a Monday, played on a Sunday. In exchange for me playing, they were supposed to redo my contract. As soon as we lost, sent my agent in. They told him to go fuck himself. And the problem was all the national reports came out, and I was the number one rated left guard in the NFL. Will Shields was number 2. And the money was really messed up. And I went in and I was like, yo man, the money's fucked. I played hurt, we lost, you promised me a new contract, this is where I'm at. And they basically told me to kick rocks. So I ended up going to Kansas City and getting into a worse situation. And I don't know if that was the right decision, but like I had this black and white mentality. Right is right, your word means something. A man, when he shakes your hand, his fucking word means something. You get a little bit older and realize there's many shades of gray. And I should have never believed those motherfuckers. I should have told them, hey man, I'll go play when we sign the contract today. Don't shake my hand and say we're gonna do it in 7. Sign it today, I'll go get a piece of paper. Didn't know that. I thought, when you take somebody's word, shake their hand, look you in the eye, shake your hand, head coach, general manager of the team, different deal, man. But fight your ego, right? Seneca understood how well our ego can impede us from learning and progress. Don't be the bottleneck. Don't be the fucking thorn that drags the shirt. Don't be that sliver. Think everything about sliding through, and if ego becomes the crux for your demise, step it back and throw that motherfucker in the trash. I would rather, like I said, I come from a family of attorneys, and the amount of stories that my dad and my brother have where people have lost fortunes because of their ego. This guy screwed me, I'm gonna sue him, and I'm gonna spend all of my money to somehow prove him right. And I remember my dad's like, I don't care about ego. Being right's really expensive. I'd rather keep my money and let that other guy go and demise, right? So these 3 lessons from Seneca have survived through time, not because they survived for 2,000 years because all of his stuff survived, but because they're accurate. And as you're listening to them, you're thinking to yourself, shit, this applies to me. So this is the quote I got to. Often a very old man has no other proof of his long life than his age. How crazy is that? The fact that you get to a life and you think, shit, I wasted it. I don't have any receipts for this. We had some shirts, it's like, I don't want to die without scars. Scars to me are receipts, right? People ask me the scars on my knees. I'm like, yep, 1999 patellar tendon against the Arizona Cardinals. ACL here, this was an uppercut, this was a bottle. I can tell you all the scars on my face because they were all moments in time where I either was the hammer or I was the nail. And that be the hammer, which is really hilarious because that came from my rookie year in the NFL. I think I've told you guys a story, but I was kneeling down, we were doing stretch, and Tom Modrak, who was our GM at the Eagles at the time, walks over to me and he goes, hey man, I'm gonna tell you 2 things. Remember, this is a violent game played by violent individuals who get paid a lot of money to do violence on behalf of old rich white men. And I was like 23, I'm like, okay. And then he said, the other one is, on every play you're the hammer or the nail. As long as you're the hammer more than your nail, you'll survive this game. Be the hammer. Patted me on the head and left. And that's where that story came from. So Marcus Aurelius, we couldn't not include him if we're gonna be in a discussion of some of the greatest thinkers on the planet. Marcus was a Roman emperor and considered one of the 5 best, and is a stalwart figure within everything. How many of you guys have seen Gladiator? Maximus. The old man that Commodus kills. That is Marcus Aurelius. This, Roman emperor who was a thinker, a poet. All these things. Was an extremely impactful person. Wrote a book called Meditations and a few others. Oh, sorry, going this way. So he lived in the 2nd century in the years 21 to 180. So when did Seneca? Yeah. So now all of a sudden here we are years later. So now these guys are stacking. Now you have Cicero, you have Seneca. Now we're ending up at Marcus Aurelius, who is considered by many to be, one of the best thinkers ever. But he becomes the emperor of Rome, which he ruled for nearly 2 decades until his death in 1880. He was one of the most respected of emperors. Now this quote, if you guys can figure out where this quote and this piece, which became my favorite for him, which is live a good life. There are no gods. They are, if there are no gods and they are just, then there will be, not care how devout you are and you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you have lived by. If there are gods, but unjust, then you should not want to worship them. If there are no gods, then you will be gone, but you have lived a noble life that will live on in the memories of your loved ones. So, here, stand up. So this shirt is what? No masters, no gods. Take a seat. So it comes from that quote. So when I read that, I think no masters, no gods, right? Not that we're trying to be some religious person, but what if there are? Right? Are you only living a virtuous, good life because you think that somebody up in the sky is judging you? Well, what if there is? And you live your good life, right? And everything's fine, right? But what if they are, you get up there and this isn't how you're supposed to live? Would you want to be there anyway? And what if there are none? Are you only living a good life because somebody is watching you? No, because this is what we do. This is who you are. Somebody walks through your door and you have the opportunity to influence them in a positive way. That's the goal. You don't want to be the Mark Bush, and I joke about this coach I had when I was in 5th grade. He was my basketball coach. I grew a bunch, extremely uncoordinated, couldn't dribble, couldn't 2 left feet, told me I was the single worst athlete he'd ever seen, and when I went to go play high school football, I would quit instantly and I would never do anything athletic in my life. What a dickhead. But thank God he did, because I probably worked to spite this guy. And I always wonder, I'm like, should I hire a PI and find him and show up and punchify his face? Or thank him. Thank you for being the piece of shit I needed. But I'm the type of person where I do things because you tell me I can't. How many kids aren't like that? So when I talk about the no masters, no gods, really the theory or the symbolism behind them is you're not doing it because somebody has a task on your back. Somebody's not putting the whip to your back. There's nobody up in the sky watching you. Do it because you know what's right, and we all know what's right and wrong. Now we deviate, we lie to ourselves. It's real easy to be convince yourself. You can use rhetoric and be like, well, I'm gonna create my Dos Passos and Logos, and I'm gonna bullshit myself, but you can't. At night when you close your eyes, and everything gets nice and quiet and, the good and the bad floats in and out, you know exactly what you did, what you didn't do, and more importantly, who you are. And if you don't, you need to go find out who you are. But I really believe the fact that you guys went through the methodology, came to the block one, and allowed us to put you through that crucible, which isn't easy. We have a lot of people fail. I don't know if you guys knew that. There's way more people that should be in this room if this was some money-making scheme, right? We'd just do CrossFit. Here you go. Here's your fucking block. But we don't. Why? Because it's important. I don't want to sit in a room with people that just happen to show up and stamp. I want people to show up and wanted it, steal it, fucking steal it from me. And that's the people I want, and that's where the no gods, no masters come from. And what's amazing about Harry and I have these conversations and he creates these images and I'm like, God damn it. These are so cool. But why? Because they're so personal to me. So, last piece, Marcus Aurelius, waste no time arguing around what a good man is, just be one, right? But yeah, you hear people constantly arguing what a good coach is, what a good person, what good, this and this, and you get in all this nuance. It's like, move well, eat well, sleep well, right? Be a good person, be a good father. Be the type of person that you want to bring into your life. And, don't waste time arguing about it, because people will. Like we talked about being a miser of time, don't waste time arguing about what a good man is. We fucking know. Or a good woman, good person, right? It's very simple. And I think as I get older, I realize the simplicity of it. One, a great reflection for you is how those people that you most admire treat you. I know I've done well when my friends show up and kick ass and put on amazing seminars and blow my mind, where I'm like, fuck yeah. I'm so stoked that you guys showed up and did this. Why? Because it's a reflection for my relationship, more importantly, how well we're doing it. And I'm so stoked that you guys got a chance to get a chance to do this. Me and my friends come hang out with me, and I'm just super proud that you guys went through this, you guys are at this point, and allowed me to get up and chew your ear a little bit about rhetoric and some of the stuff I learned in Antiquity. Thank you.